Episode 6 of The Rings of Power is here, and again, it's not really a great episode. It could have been a great episode if they didn't destroy the whole story in the first 5 episodes. They completely ruined the lore, they ruined the canonical characters, and they even ruined their original characters because we don't care about them. They did nothing for us to care about their story. It's it's just a bunch of people now doing stuff and saying stuff that doesn't make sense. Um, it's damning. It's really damning. And I've said this before. Um, they could have done so much with just the appendices. They could have added some original characters throughout the story because, of course, the second age takes several thousands of years, but they chose to pull everything together. And then you wouldn't need all these original characters because you would have enough characters from like 3,400 years of history together in one time period. But it doesn't work at all. This time condensation, this putting characters together in places where they shouldn't be or in a time where they shouldn't be, in roles they shouldn't be playing. So the story is completely ruined at this point, and it even this makes it worse. I mean, Numenor is completely ruined, and this shot for me says enough for this entire episode. Um, these are 3 ships with supposedly 500 soldiers in them, and horses, and supplies, and possibly people, toolsmiths, blacksmiths, people who tending horses, cooks, all of that. Everyone you would suspect with a moving army. The baggage train, people. People taking care of these supplies and bring them to the army when they make camp. You would suspect that there would be at least 1,000 people involved in this exposition. You would also need guards for the ships when they land. You would need people, shipwrights, for making repairs to the ships if needed. You would need so much more people than 500 just uh, for this expedition, and you can't fit them on 3 ships. Um, this is basically the ship, I mean, the hold of the ship. I think I counted 12 horses in this ship. So all 3 ships are the same size. So if they would have the same layout, you would have 36 horses. And you could say, okay, that's fair. That's for the queen, for the queen's retinue, for the queen's guard, and for the senior officers. So that would make sense, but not for the entire army, not for 500 people. And also, there's not enough space in this hold to house 500 soldiers and all the supplies. There's no way in hell then that could work, except if this is a Harry Potter ship. In the fourth movie of Harry Potter, they have this tent where when they go in, it's like a big house inside of what looks in the outside like a little tent. So maybe this is some Harry Potter magic thrown in that if you go into the hold of the ship, it magically expands that it holds 500 people. So that would be the only explanation. Also, Isildur, in the beginning of the episode, he isn't wearing pants, so he's like walking around just in his tunic through the stables and then onto the deck, and you see a few people on the deck, tending the rigging and guarding the ships or on the lookout, at the helm of the ship, all of that. But there's no way in hell that there could be 500 people on these 3 ships. No way. And 1,000 people needed for this expedition isn't an exaggeration. It's a fair amount of people that would have been involved, but they can't fit on these 3 ships. So he basically wants to be on the lookout to see the land, and then he sees Galadriel, Commander Galadriel, for some reason. So Elendil doesn't have the command. Halbrand doesn't have the command, even though he knows the Southlands, but Galadriel has a command for some reason. We don't know why. She's already in full battle armor, ready to jump ship and slaughter some orcs when they land. But they're still on the open sea. And they talk a bit about um, dumb stuff. Really, it's not really interesting. Um, Isildur is like, I wanted to leave Númenor if it because it's not the real Númenor. Galadriel says that Númenor existed, or the real Númenor existed, and that she already has seen land because she has, elven eyes, and she want to ask Isildur where his mother is because he says he looks more like his mother, but he doesn't really answer that. Then we get the sunrise, and Isildur is like, wow, wow, never seen anything like this. Actually, I don't have a problem with this scene because, of course, it's the first time or in this series, he would see Middle Earth and a sunrise over Middle Earth. So that he would be impressed, okay, that's fair. Then Elendil comes onto deck. Isildur goes away, and look at this armor. This is supposed to be scale armor, very flexible armor, and it looks so stiff. It really doesn't look flexible at all. Um, and his belt is really high up. So, it's kind of weird, this armor, and I don't think that there was many thought going into this at all. It was like, just give them scale armor and whatever material is available to you. Because this wouldn't be scale armor. Scale armor would, as I've said, it would be very flexible because it would be worn by light infantry or horsemen. Um, so they needed to be flexible, and this doesn't look flexible at all. Um, and they talk a bit. He talks a bit with Galadriel, again about Middle Earth, that he sees it as coming of light or something like that. It's very generic. And he says that his wife drowned in the sea and then just leaves. He goes to Miriel, saying that there has been land sighted, and she says that he needs to signal all the other ships to be prepared to land in several days and move inward to the Southlands. And then we get this nice transition shot to Arondir's story. But the point on which I'm going to start the story, it isn't this point. Because I tried to do the storyline first, this Numenor storyline first, because it later moves into the Arondir storyline. But this is a nice transition shot. I don't wanted to show it because it shows that at least there are some people involved that have some creative ideas that can work, because it's a nice transition. I don't think it's needed, but it is a nice transition. So moving on to Arondir storyline, we have first another view of Adar. His hand, he's digging a hole. He puts some of the Alpharin seeds in there, the seeds that Bronwyn gave to Arondir in the first episode. So he apparently also has some of these, and he buries them, and then gives a speech to his orcs about how they moved from the Grey Mountains to the Ifel Arnen. I don't know where the Ifel Arnen is because I only know the Emin Arnen, which is close to Osgiliath. So I don't know what he's talking about. It's not a mountain range, it's some hills of the Ifel Duath running towards Osgiliath. So I have no clue how they got there or what they were doing there. And he's talking about the Iron Fist of the Uruk. It's also very weird because Urukai aren't described in the histories until the year 2475, I believe, of the Third Age, when they invade Ithilien. That is the first time that Uruk or Urukai are mentioned. So having Uruks in the Second Age, it also doesn't really make a lot of sense because they would have been described by the elves at least. during the War of the Lost Alliance, or other battles. If there were Urukai, we would have known it in the Second Age. So we can assume that there were none. So they make ready to depart to Osterith. This is also a nice shot. I mean, the moving army to the tower, but the tower is empty. Wow, surprise, surprise. So nobody saw anyone moving out, or are these people still inside, in the barracks deeper into the tower? No, only Arondir is still there. Um, when Adar sees like this image of Sauron or whoever that is with the magic sword, Waldrek is, asking about Sauron and where he is, but Adar doesn't want to answer, and then he says that he smells the elf, so that he is still there. Arondir proceeds to shoot some orcs, then he shoots an arrow at the tower at some rope, holding, the tower together, basically, which is a very bad design for a tower. If you need ropes and metal, metal work to keep your tower together, your tower is very badly built. So the tower basically collapses, and the village people who are now all the way down of the mountain, they are cheering. So I mean, how did these people get there without the orcs noticing? Because there were so many orcs, and I mean, a lot of them are dead now, or so. But nobody saw these people moving down or moving away, because as I've seen it, there's only one way um, into the tower, and that's the bridge. So they would have seen these people moving out. But anyway, they go to prepare the village. Arondir tries to break the sword with a hammer, but the hammer breaks, and he's like, "There's no power that we possess that can break it," which is of course very similar to what Elrond says when you know Gimli tries to break the ring in the Fellowship of the Rings movie, because of course the One Ring cannot be destroyed by any earthly means. So this is basically, another generic line that they just pulled from the Peter Jackson movies to put in there, to make the sword more than it is. It's just an imaginary prop in an imaginary world that doesn't exist. I mean, Tolkien's world doesn't exist, obviously, but this isn't Tolkien's world. This is this is generic fantasy and badly written at that. So they proceed to fortify the village. They close up the tunnel, or at least the entrance of the tunnel, because I mean it's such a long tunnel, they cannot fill it in completely. It's insane. So they put some planks and some stone slabs on it. Arondir gives a speech that this is a very good position, which it isn't. I mean, seriously, why would you go back to this village? It's in a very bad spot. And they say that their whole strategy is um, focused on orcs crossing a small bridge over, like a small river, or a small stream, that isn't even difficult to cross. And apparently the tavern will be their keep. So I've read an article that says that this is basically the Helm's Deep fight of the Rings of Power, which makes no sense. It's just a village with some village people, so they shouldn't be able to survive this in any capacity. So we see Bronwyn preparing a fire cart, putting some oil, and you see the bridge in the background, and it's like a tiny little stream. I mean, orcs could cross that. They don't like crossing rivers, but they can cross, small streams with no problem at all. It wouldn't be any issue. So, um, their whole strategy relies on the orcs crossing this tiny bridge. So there's no palisade. There's no real choke points that they create. They don't break down some of the houses to create like a wall of some kind. They do nothing of that. They just rely on the orcs being stupid enough to follow their exact strategy, which they will do, obviously. And then Theo gets placed into the tavern so he can defend um, the the old people and the women, or some of the women at least, and the kids. And he's like, I mean, tell me the story that you told me when I had bad dreams. And Bronwyn is like, okay. And she tells a very generic story that as long as he keeps in the light, the shadow can't touch him. And then she gives him a hug. And this is supposed to be a very emotional moment, of course, because we don't know what will happen to these characters. But it's so blandly acted. And they didn't make us care about these characters in the first place, so this moment is ruined as well because they fail to build up any emotional connection to these characters. I mean, Bronwyn was like this leader in the beginning of the last episode, and then she just broke down after the first setback and she gave up. So she isn't a good leader, and it doesn't really make sense that she would now lead the village, because she failed. She basically let half of the people run away. Um, and this emotional moment is ruined because both actors are very blandly acting throughout the whole series. So there isn't any real connection between them. It seems no really emotional feeling that we get from their scenes together. And I mean, this is also like, I mean, they're like, a hug, and it's like, okay, yeah, see you, bye, see you, in the next episode probably. And then Arondir gives Bronwyn some Alpharin seeds and says that it is a ritual of the elves to bury those, or plant those before battle. So that's of course why Adar also planted them before battle. Um, so they kiss. Um, yeah, out of the blue as well, because I haven't seen any moment of them together, of Bronwyn and Arondir together, where I would say that, I mean, those two people are in love. There's not a single moment, not a single moment. There's nothing of emotion on their faces. I mean, it's just acting with a poker face that they do. So again, this is supposed to be like a moment where we say, "Ah, they kissed," but it's like, well, okay, I mean, I guess. And the only thing that makes us feel that they are in love is because the showrunners or the actors, they told us that they are in love and they have a relationship. That's the only reason why we know that, because you wouldn't be able to guess it from their acting or from their interactions, because it's just very bland, all of it. And then we get to the beginning of the battle. You see this massive horde of orcs descending onto Tir Harat, and there's this one orc who goes to check out the cart. One orc. So there's hundreds of them down there at least, and there's just the one who goes to check out a cart. Of course, he gets killed by Bronwyn, who lights up the cart and pushes it down, or cuts a rope and lets it roll down. And the orcs are then trapped between two burning carts, but one of them is like, I mean, it's very badly placed. So it doesn't really work. The orcs break out, and there's significantly less orcs there than there were a few shots before. Um, Obviously, to increase the odds for the villagers, but um, if you put like a thousand orcs in, two shots before, there should be 1,000 orcs 2 shots later. I mean, this is like, I mean, 50 orcs, 60 orcs, maybe 100 in this area. There's not a lot at all. In the meanwhile, there's a few orcs with a battering ram running to the tavern. They call it the keep. I mean, they say they're going to the keep. They're going to the keep. I mean, it's just a tavern, and how do they know that there are people inside there? Did Waldrick tell them? I mean, we don't see Waldrick in this scene, so I mean, Why would they assume themselves that they in the first place would need a battering ram, and in the second place that the tavern is a place where there's also people? I mean, why don't they just burn it down? If there are people inside, it's so much easier. I mean, they don't really need this battering ram. Just a few torches, and I mean, it gets the job done. And then either they come out or they die inside. So why the battering ram? It makes no sense. But of course, this is because the showrunners have no idea what they are doing, um, and they also don't really think things through. Then, just before they start battering the door in, there are these other villages who pour out, and the guy in his sheepskin, he's like, stabbing orcs, and they're all like very good warriors now for some reason. I mean, they didn't have any training at all, so I mean, suddenly they can fight orcs. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess it doesn't work, but there's so much more than the show that doesn't work. So the showrunners at this point, they just want to show a nice battle scene, but it doesn't really work because, for example, in Helm's Deep, you would have and the shot of these people, in rusty, male and old people and younger people who are also not supposed to fight. I mean, they're refugees, most of them, and um, Rohan doesn't really have this standing army. It's more of an army that is comprised of people, of the villagers who are called up to arms, and they have like their mail that they wear once in a few decades or something, and that's why it's rusty. It's because they don't really have a mind to fight. They fight when called upon, but these people don't know how to fight. I mean, they don't have armor, they don't have weapons or actual real weapons, but suddenly they're just transformed into warriors, and it's very odd for because at the actual Battle of Helm's Deep, you at least had the feeling that some of the people could actually fight. And in this scene, it's just, sheep herders. I mean, they're not supposed to fight. I mean, they have no experience at all, so why would they suddenly be able to wield like a polearm or a sword or a mace and be able to fight off orcs who are just not trained, or yeah, they're just used to killing and fighting, so it makes no sense. Then Arondir gets, uh, thrown from a roof, and he gets this orc fight, uh, and he wears his watch to check how long this episode will take, probably. So that's a big oversight in this show. I mean, it's like the Game of Thrones Starbucks cup that was there in season 8. So season 8 had so much flaws, and um, the coffee cup was the least of it. Like this watch is the least of the problems of this show. But I mean, it shows that the eye for detail isn't really there. And why would the actor wear his watch over his costume? Why not under it? I mean, just roll up the sleeve when you need to check the time. But this is just ridiculous. I mean, this is just prior to that shot. He bumps into this big orc, um, and this is this is a nice scene. I mean, the total sequence is nice because Arondir is almost killed, and it's actually, I mean, the odds are against him because this orc is so much bigger. He's like, holding him down and throwing him about, and Arondir stabs him in the eye, but it doesn't really do much. So he almost gets killed, and it's a really good sequence. So he's like on the well, he's being choked. He tries to pull out the piece of metal that he put in the orc's eye, and the orc is bleeding all over him. So I mean, the odds are really against him, but luckily he gets saved by Brondon. Hooray! And they won, which is really surprising. If you saw the amount of orcs that were there, they shouldn't have won at all. Um, but there's a twist, of course, because Arondir touches one of the guy's, wounds, and it's red blood instead of black blood. So these are humans. These are not orcs. Also, this guy is wearing clearly a Greek helmet that they got from a museum on loan or something. I don't know. It's very distinctly Greek and not really Orcish. Um, and yeah, then they start, pulling off the helmets and the caps of the orcs, and they turn out to be their villager friends. So yeah, they butchered their own, which is very smart, of course, but it's weird that nobody noticed. Um, you know, they didn't talk or they didn't say, hi Fred, it's me. Don't you recognize me? Um, they were all acting like orcs, even though they are, humans. So also a bit odd. Um, so yeah, but it shows that these people are, they paid with their lives um, to fight for the wrong side. Yeah, and the villagers, of course, they are sad because a few days ago these were their friends, but they just left. I mean, they left them alone. So, um, I mean, I don't think they should care that much about them. And it turns out that Adar has the village surrounded with other orcs, and they shoot a bunch of arrows. Bronwyn gets an arrow clean through her shoulder, and of course the scapula, the shoulder bone, um, is very flat and very thin. So of course an arrow could easily pierce it, and she isn't wearing armor. So yeah, the force with which it's shot is so great that it just goes clean through. Luckily for her, because it's way easier to remove the arrow that way. But I mean, the wound would be massive. I mean, it's a barbed point, and it's a very big wound that we should see. Um, so in the tavern, her wound gets burnt, uh, shut, cauterized, and then Adar arrives in the village between the burning guards. Also a nice visual shot. And in the meanwhile, we see the Rohirrim or Númenor, on their horses, um, running towards, um, yeah, Tir Harat, probably, to Mordor. Hooray! And I've said it in the beginning of the episode with the three ships. There's no way that so many horses could fit on three ships. So where did they get them? Um, there's no Rohirrim, of course, nearby to help them. Um, there's probably some wild horses here and there, but not in such an amount. Or there wouldn't be any cities in this second age, in Amazon's second age. You would have, a tribal society basically in the Southland, so you wouldn't have a concentration of or such a big concentration of horses, and certainly not the way they go, because they sail up all the way onto the Anduin, um, up until where Osgiliath would later be, and then just go through to Mordor, presumably at least. So they wouldn't have a chance to find that much horses and also that much soldiers, because so many soldiers couldn't fit on these ships as well. So it's really ridiculous that Amazon thought that people wouldn't notice or wouldn't say that it's impossible for so many horses and so many people to be on these three ships, as well as so much armor. I mean, there's just no space for it. Um, in Tir Harat, there's Adar, who gets into the tavern, then just starts killing the people because he wants to know where the sword is, and he threatens, to kill Bronwyn. She has a knife onto her neck, so she's, close to being decapitated, and Arondir is holds strong, and it's impressive, of course. But Theo breaks, and he gives up the location of the sword, of course, because he doesn't want his mother to die. It's a very natural, it's, but again, they fail to build up this emotional connection for us to care about these characters. So I mean, I wouldn't have cared if Bronwyn died or if Theo died or if Arondir died. It wouldn't matter at all. I mean, yeah, they're not really the nicest people or the people you would empathize with. But Adar gets the sword. Um, all is not well because now he can go to Osterith and unlock the statue or whatever he wants to do. But luckily, in the nick of time, Númenor arrives or Rohan arrives, um, and they just start butchering the orcs left and right. Galadriel is doing horse tricks. I mean, she's like lying on her horse sideways after dodging an arrow, and then she rides like that for 5 seconds before she cuts off York's head. Um, well, it's impressive horse skill, but I mean, it's useless. I mean, why don't they have shields? I mean, they could have used shields. I mean, I have no problem in horse fights with shields. So, I mean, why not? Of course, because they can do all sorts of acrobatics this way. Um, yeah, they can show how badass Galadriel is, but I mean, she's still arrogant, and she's Mary Sue. I mean, she doesn't get hit. I mean, her dress got cut in the last episode, so I mean, you could say that she's not invincible, but I mean, she's Mary Sue. I mean, she can't do anything wrong. She gets her way always. She's always right. I mean, she's just badass. She kills everyone. She's just fantastic, and everybody is in awe of her. Which doesn't make sense. I mean, yeah, people would have been in awe of her, but yeah, not in this way. Isildur gets permission from the queen to go help. I mean, the rest is just standing there. They're just watching the show. Halbrand saves Elendil, and Arondir's like, "Wow, Galadriel, the commander of the northern armies." Um, well, she wouldn't be the commander of the northern armies because Gil-galad declared peace in Middle-earth in the first episode. And for all they know, Galadriel, there are no more northern armies because, I mean, Galadriel left to Valinor. And would he have even met Galadriel? I mean, would he have known her? We don't know. We have never seen them meet. So, I mean, but of course, this shows that everybody knows Galadriel and everybody knows Galadriel is like this badass warrior, and Theo is like, wow, an elf. He's not like, wow, Númenor, they came to save us. It's like, wow, an elf. It's Galadriel. I mean, he's only looking at Galadriel, not at the Númenorian soldiers who are like doing most of the work. She's just galloping through and doing horse tricks, basically. Adar gets away. Galadriel um, goes, um, you know, hunting for him through the forest, and it is a nice shot. To be fair, I mean, it's a nice scene, um, but again, it doesn't make sense because this isn't Mordor. This is not the location where they should be because Mordor is this place of a dreary place, a dry place. The valleys, the Morgul Vale, the plateau of Gorgoroth, all these places are barren and empty wastelands. So you wouldn't be able to inhabit these places as humans, even in the second age, and not even in the first age. Where you could live is Nurnen, which is a southern area of Mordor, but they aren't there. And Nurnen is more fertile because there are rivers there, and there's the Sea of Nurn. So they could live there, but they live in the northwest of Mordor, which is just a barren wasteland. So it doesn't make sense to have a forest there. And also, Halbrand cuts off Adar and Galadriel for some reason. I mean, I don't know where he came from, but he, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But they just want to have this nice scene where Adar or where Halbrand puts out his spear, and then Adar, his horse, trips on it, and he falls down. Halbrand wants to kill Adar because he has done something to him that we don't know, and Galadriel is like, "Stop! I need him alive. I need to, talk to him about stuff, for reasons." And then they get to talking. Um, what she says is that he is one of the elves corrupted by Morgoth, into the first orc, or into the first orcs, and he says we prefer Uruk, which, Urukai means orc folk, so they are related to orcs. But if he was an orc or an Uruk, corrupted by Morgoth, he wouldn't look like an elf. He would look like an orc, because why do all the other orcs, look like orcs and he doesn't? I mean, it doesn't make sense. The writers didn't think this through. So they could have had, like a bigger orc there, who could have been an elf and had maybe some more memories of his elf life because he got turned, more recently by Sauron. I mean, that could have been a solution, but he looks like an elf. He's just a bit scarred. He's not really mutilated or tortured in a way, that makes him look like an orc. So this again makes no sense. So he's talking about, Sauron, who was looking for some dark magic, but no matter how much people or orcs he sacrificed, he couldn't find it, and it remained hidden. He is like, I killed Sauron. Um, Galadriel obviously doesn't believe him, and we as viewers, we don't believe him, and as Tolkien fans, we don't believe him because Sauron is alive. Um, Otherwise, the Third Age couldn't happen, so it wouldn't make sense. I don't know why he says this. It's kind of useless, to say. And Galadriel is like, I'm going to kill all the orcs and you will be the last. And Adar says, this is the best line from this episode, I think. He says, "I see I'm not the only elf touched by darkness." And then she gets mad again and tries to cut his throat open, but now she is stopped by Halbrand. Hooray! They get this nice scene near a little stream, um, where they talk about their feelings, and it's really, again, it's like a nonsensical conversation, because she is like, whatever he did to you, let it go. But why should he let go if she can't let go all her problems? And she's like, I can keep on to, holding on to my problems, but you can't. So again, very arrogant and very selfish, of her. But we're used to that by now. Um, then we get to a party in the village. Yeah, okay, this is just like a village barbecue at this point. Um, Bronwyn gets introduced to Miriel, and Arondir is actually the first one to bow to Miriel, to the Queen Regent. Nobody in this village bowed for her. Nobody. She's just sitting there mingling with the ordinary folk, um, which you wouldn't expect her doing. Bronwyn doesn't bow for her. She doesn't, thank her. And Arondir at least shows some respect for her. But the rest of them is like, nah. This is just another woman from our village, apparently. Um, Halbrand then gets proclaimed as king of the Southlands. Again, nobody bows for him, but he does get a pint of beer. So that's nice for him, I guess. He doesn't get a crown. He doesn't get anything. So it's like, okay, cool. I'm the king. I'm king now. Halbrand is king now. So yeah, whatever, I guess. Arondir, again, this is again a scene that is very typical for this show. Arrogant Galadriel, because Arondir says, the people of the south of this area have been looking so long, forward to this moment. To having their king again, and Galadriel is like, but not as long as the elves. What do the elves care about a king in the Southlands? I mean, they don't. They wouldn't. So again, this is just, one of these scenes that is so typical, for the show at this point. It doesn't make sense, and it just shows how arrogant, Galadriel is. She gives Arondir the the blade. I mean the Sauron blade, or whatever it is, um, and he gives it to Theo because he says, or Theo says that when he held this sword, he felt the power of it. So Arondir gives him the hilt and says that he should give it to Númenor so they can throw it into the sea on their way home, to be rid of this power. Which, I mean, you wouldn't get rid of that feeling um, just because someone else throws it away. So again, very weird. So this package, it passed through the hands of Adar, through the hands of Galadriel, through the hands of Arondir, and into the hands of Theo. But they were all deceived, for it was an axe. Uh, which is, I mean, nobody noticed that it was like a big blade sticking out at the side and not like a straight form. Nobody noticed, apparently. Nobody felt it, so nobody felt that it would have been lighter than this sword. I mean, well, yeah, nobody thought this through. This doesn't work at all. This doesn't make sense. So Waldrek took the sword. Probably when Numenor arrived and Adar and the orcs, they went outside. He just took the blade, and he unlocks the secret power of Osterith, which is basically flooding a lake. I mean, this is like a power plant, like a hydro power plant there, and it's just like this big lake, and it breaks open. We get a moment between Isildur and Elendil. They talk about horses and Isildur's dead mom. But the party gets ruined, of course, by this flooding. I mean, it just you get these geysers that are like spraying out of the ground where this tunnel was located, and the orcs start chanting Udun, Udun, and I don't know why, because I mean Udun is this region in the north of Mordor, where the Black Gate is located. So I don't know why they are chanting that, because they're not there and they're not even close, and Mount Doom isn't close, and Baradur isn't close. So I mean, why would they chant Udun? I mean, no idea at all. So the big trench apparently was cut to Mount Doom. So they destroyed all the trees up until the edge of the forest. So the water is flowing through the trench, and Mount Doom explodes, and there's like this big, stream of lava, this pyroclastic flow. Adar is gone, and Galadriel stands into the, basically in the middle of the pyroclastic flow. So, I mean, everybody would be dead. All the Númenóreans would be dead. All the villagers will be dead. Galadriel would be dead in this case. I mean, if they are still alive in the next episode, it doesn't make sense. They would all be dead. I mean, elves aren't fireproof. Númenóreans aren't fireproof. I mean, it would be, a fitting end, being so arrogant, that you just die in fire. I mean, or something like that. I mean, I wouldn't mind not seeing Galadriel again, ever, in this series, because they completely ruined the character. What they also ruined is, the lore, because this is what I forgot to mention earlier. I mean, when Galadriel and Adar are talking, Adar is saying that he, the Uruk, which he calls the elves that are turned, um, and the orcs, they are children of the Master of the Secret Fire. The Master of the Secret Fire is Eru Ilúvatar. So, no, the children of Ilúvatar are elves and men. Those two, not orcs, not dwarves. The dwarves are basically the children of Aule, and the orcs were created by Morgoth. They are not, placed into the world as the elves were. They were created from the elves. So, I mean, in a way, you could say that the orcs are then, children of Ilúvatar that are turned to darkness. But no, they are creations of Morgoth, of Melkor. Um, they are not children of Iluvatar, or not anymore. Um, they don't really deserve a place in this world, because they're just pure evil. Um, so yeah, this is the sixth episode, which doesn't consist of a lot of storylines. It's just two storylines: Númenor arriving in Middle Earth, and then Arondir. But there's so much wrong again in terms of the lore. They just keep on ruining it. I mean, now they make Uruk, like these turned elves that are not even looking like orcs, um, and the orcs are like their children for some reason, and you know, it's a very odd thing that happens here. It's it's just, you have these stories that you can create in the appendices. You have basically the layout for them. Yes, you can fill in some stories. You can create some original characters to give these stories more depth. But if you place them all together in the same time span, you don't need these original characters, because you would have enough characters in the appendices, in the history of the Second Age, to fill this entire timeline. So these original characters, they are useless in the first place, but in the second place they are even more useless because we don't care about them. So you want in your show that people care about your characters, if they're canonical or non-canonical, but um, they don't make us feel anything for them. They don't make us feel anything for even for the original characters, for the canonical characters. Um, so we don't like Galadriel in this show because she is arrogant and she can't do nothing wrong, and or she can do nothing wrong and she gets her way always. She's just this invincible fighter, and she's not wise at all. She's arrogant and brash and hateful. So not really the Galadriel that we would expect in the Second Age, a wise ruler of her own people. So we don't get to see anything of that. So this is this is something that returns in the show over and over again. Um, Halbrand is switching his mind constantly. I mean, once he at one moment he doesn't like Galadriel, and the next moment he's like, okay, fine, I follow you. And the next moment he's angry again, and then he follows her again. So it's a weird dynamic that they just change the characters' opinions of each other, um, whenever they need to. So it's not really organically. It doesn't feel natural. It feels forced and contrived, and um, this is the show that Amazon wanted to be their Game of Thrones, but they failed miserably. They wanted it to be, the novel that Tolkien never wrote, but they failed completely and utterly. They wanted this to be something that stood apart from the Peter Jackson trilogy, but they failed miserably again because they keep on putting these references to the movies, um, in their story, um, and it's so lazy. And they wanted to show that even junior writers, people without much experience, they could write a good story with given source material. But again, they failed completely. They said they went back to the books always, but they never even looked at the books, as it seems. I mean, they put some events that they know of in the stories and talk a bit about them. They place some names here and there. They use balrogs and elves and dragons and eagles and whatever they want in the places they want, not because they want to create a story that is true to the Second Age, but because they want to tell a story that they want set in the Tolkien universe without being Tolkien, because of course, um, the story needs to be adapted to the modern age, and Tolkien apparently was a racist and a sexist for not putting diverse people in there. not putting females in there. Um, but this is again something that, you know, they fail to understand Tolkien, and they fail to see the strong female characters that are actually in the story. Agreed, there are not that many women in the story, but there are phenomenally strong women in Tolkien's Legendarium. There are so many different people, and you know, there is so much diversity in Tolkien's work. If you're just willing to read the actual books and the actual lore, then you will see it directly. That there is so much diversity, that there are so many strong female characters, but they didn't want to see that, and they wanted to create strong characters of their own, um, in places that they shouldn't be, with, you know, doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, um, and it completely fails. They wanted to create a strong Galadriel, a young, brash Galadriel, but they failed. They failed to create a younger Galadriel. They failed to create a second age Galadriel. Um, they failed to create, you know, a logical story that makes sense. They failed to create these great costumes. I mean, it looks generic, all of it. It doesn't look, you know, like a story that is real. It feels like, I mean, they obviously had some ideas and they put them on paper, and they said, well, yeah, I mean, this is nice. I mean, don't think about it too much, and then, you know, just do it. Because I mean, you could just swap the Númenorians and the Rohirrim, and nobody would, you know, see the difference. I mean, they are basically Rohirrim at this point, and they're doing more horse riding than sailing. So, um, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Also, what I've said before, I mean, if you only have three ships, you should only have as many soldiers as can fit in those ships, and as many horses as can fit in those ships, and they fail at even doing that. You know, they even fail at making a believable army, and a believable fleet with a believable army, because no way in hell that there could be 500 horses and 500 soldiers in these three ships. It makes no sense. But these people don't care, and you know, at this point it's so obvious, but people are still, you know, praising the show for some reason, for being like the bestest thing ever. But it's not. It's mediocre at best. Um, it's it's you know, it's a cesspit at worst. So an episode 6, you know, it doesn't do anything to increase that opinion. Um, but you know, that was it for episode 6. It's a very depressing episode again, but let me know in the comments what you think about these scenes and these characters and all of it. Um, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe. I thank you for watching, and I see you in the next one. Bye.